Hey everybody, welcome back to thoughtraid. It has been a hot second because I have had COVID, but now I am on the up end of that. I don't know. I'm doing better. Let's just put it that way. That's a lot better. I'm doing better. And today we're going to be talking about uh kind of finding hope, how to be hopeful. Can you be hopeful in times of grief? Like you're going through something crazy. You had just been fired. You just lost your parents. Something terrible has happened. Now you're trying to figure out how you're going to be hopeful through it all. That's something we're going to be navigating today. Let's just jump right into it. Welcome back to Thought Raid. I'm Brandon, and with me today is Tim in a separate location. There he is. There is our man. And
Are these?
let us not forget these. We need some of these eyebrows. Let's go. Oh gosh, it feels so good to be back. Welcome, guys. Today we're talking about finding hope or being hopeful in a time of grief. Is it possible to be hopeful in a time of grief? Like we're talking something has happened in your life and it is affecting you heavily. Like for me, if my parents were to die, that would probably bring a lot of grief. Like, and the only reason why I said probably is because there was a period of time in my life where the Holy Spirit helped me grieve through something in one night, but the likelihood of that happening a second time, I don't know. So unless the Holy Spirit were to do that, I'd be grieving if that happened to me, or if I lost a job and now I don't have like another job prepared. What am I gonna do? Like that would be some grief, and it would be very hard to be hopeful. And this is the very question that you posed last week. I think the very beginning of last week, Tim. And so, to better understand this question, I want you to kind of start off with it so that way we can look at it as you were thinking it.
Sure. So I work for a nonprofit called We Carry Kevin, and about a week and a half ago, we found out that one of the families that we serve, which is family dynamic, it's a mom, a dad, I think two siblings, and then another child that has spinal muscular atrophy. Their younger son, Simon, got bitten by a rattlesnake.
Oh my gosh.
Um, yeah, so he was taken to the hospital and he was in a coma for several days. And I'm not really sure exactly what all transpires when you get bitten by a venomous snake. But there was pressure being pushed down, or pressure was pushing down on his, what is that thing in the back of your brain? Like, not your spinal column, but the nerve thing
Oh,
that attaches your spinal column.
the nerve. I don't know what the nerve thing this statue.
What's it called?
Ah!
Anyway, he was in a coma, and they declared him brain dead.
Oh
They did a
no.
couple of tests, um, and they said, well, we're going to test him for brain activity. And they said, there is no brain activity. And apparently you have to do two tests to see if somebody's going to be declared legally and clinically brain dead. But then they said they saw his fingers twitch, and so there was hope. And being Christians, we're thinking, okay, it's possible, in Jesus' name, but, I've been through this before, Brandon.
Yeah.
you know, my mom was in a very similar situation. It's like, you could do all these things in Jesus' name, just, rise from the dead, Lazarus, and all that. And so part of me was thinking, okay, there's hope. And then the other part of me was thinking, wow, this sucks. This is going to happen, you know? And so as we were as an organization praying for this kid, I was trying to figure that out because um, the young girl, I forget what her name is, but she started having seizures. The young boy's sister, and she's the one that has spinal muscular atrophy.
Oh my gosh.
And it was the first time in years that she had seizures, and so we're thinking that maybe the stress of her brother being in the hospital and in a coma is really getting to her. But then we found out that he had passed away.
Oh my goodness.
And the pictures, like I've never met this family since I mean I'm still kind of new to this organization, but I saw a video of Kevin in his own wheelchair racing this little boy as he's running down the sidewalk. You know, he's just a little 7-year-old blonde haired, blue eyed boy, and he's wearing a shirt that says Best Cafe or something and a little red hat, you know? Um, and it was just so sad to think, man, you know, of all the things that could have happened to that family, all the complications predominantly reside in this one child that has a disability. To think that out of nowhere, your other child, which was happy, healthy, just living a quote unquote able-bodied normal life, would just get bitten by a snake and die a few days later. That's just whoa, what the heck, you know? And so I'm thinking, you know, how do you continue going on after something like that? Because grief is very real, you know,
Oh
and
yeah,
you just can't talk people out of grief. You're not supposed to.
right.
And if you try to, you need to check your heart because that's not the good way to do stuff. Um, oh, hey, Lord Thorcher.
Yeah,
Where are you from?
I think he's from Tennessee. I want to say.
Oh, is he one of your RPG guys?
Well, that depends. I have been trying to get him involved, but definitely he's one of my RPG friends in City of Heroes.
Yeah. So, Thorcher said, stream about hope, love that. As to why, though, hope is something we can always have, no one can take it away. And if religious, you have hope that you'll see them again. Tennessee.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the thing, man. Like, so I have a lot of friends that are not Christian, and I have a lot of friends who are Christian, and I have other friends who are of some other religious affiliation that, whatever, you know. And so it's just like, what place does hope have in death? And specifically grief. Because I know there were people when my mom died, as she was laying there and she was on morphine, and you know we were wondering like, is she gonna live? Is she gonna die? Well, what's going on? There were people that were like, oh, you know, just have enough faith and the Lord will heal her. And I gave them two of these, you know, because you know they're not really feeling what I'm feeling. They're just like invalidating the grief that I felt. And so with these families, I'm like, or this family, I'm like, man, like how do you go about this? Like, what could I say? What could I do for them that would help them have hope, but also validate their grief? You know?
Well, I feel like at first we have to figure out what stage we're in here, because like if we're talking about having hope and the person hasn't died yet, that's one thing, and then having hope and the person has died or the situation has finalized, then that's a whole different perspective in that moment. So are we going to focus first on the situation is getting bad but it's not final yet?
Well, honestly, if we're talking about it from a Christian perspective, I don't think it should matter because there were so many times where people died and Jesus was like, "Nah, you're gonna keep living. You know, let me just
True.
touch you." You know, and so if we use that same logic across all Christian faith, then why would our belief and our hope stop at death? You know, which also calls into question the grief of, oh man, well, do I actually believe what I'm believing? You know,
True.
um, so I don't know. I mean, I get your question, but I guess even something like you know you're talking as you're introducing the stream. What about losing your job? How do you maintain hope through the grief of losing your job? I mean, that's not quite as substantial because you know I'm sure your finances might be a little ambiguous for a while, but you know you can get another job, and if you don't get a job, there's welfare. I mean, there's food stamps and stuff until you can. You also have community support, and so having hope in that degree or in that scenario is a little different than having hope when a family member is laying on a bed comatose.
Well, that's the thing. I feel like I understand that you don't have to necessarily give up hope because a person has died. You know, I've heard the stories of people being raised from the dead, and I've heard of stories of people raising from the dead since the time of Christ too. So there's that as well. But I do feel like the way about holding on to hope or working with hope might be a little bit different in application depending on if the person is still alive or not alive, though. Personally, I feel like. I don't know, but you think there shouldn't be a difference?
Mm, I don't really know, man, because I think, in our Wednesday group, we talk a lot about feelings. And in psychology and sociology, I've been learning about repression and all the different coping skills that the defense mechanisms that dominate people's responses to trauma. And repression is one of them. And it's the most common. Repression is where you take a memory and you hide it away so you don't feel it, and you forget that it even happened, or you forget that you even felt that way. I don't know if I personally experience repression. Um, But I do know that it's really easy for me to separate myself from the circumstance and think about, if you think about, they talk about guys' minds being like little boxes of whatever. I've got this neat little box of, well, here's where hope is. And so if I step in there, ooh, this is a pretty little world, this feels kind of nice. But then you have the box of grief over here, and ooh, this doesn't feel really good. And honestly, being in this box makes it feel like I'm not being hopeful. And it's tough to kind of, take contents from both boxes and put them into one.
Oh, okay, so
Um,
you're really looking about how to have those two mixed together.
yeah, because, just thinking, okay, I'm experiencing grief. Does that mean that we just give up all hope and we just think how bad it
No.
can be? Or, like, how do you acknowledge that there is hope while also feeling grief at the same time?
Yeah. So first up, hello, Austin. Welcome.
Hey, Austin, congratulations. Finally, your kid's really cute.
So the way that I, at least in the moment, think and handle grief about like the topic of grief and hope together is, and this is why I keep saying, like, it's in, and hey, Zap, it's in two
Oh,
phases. Phase one is stuff's getting worse, but it's not done yet. So, like in the case, let's going back to the case of somebody is dying, and thank you for stopping in, Zap. Thank you, join us. We're talking. So, just to kind of bring it up, we're asking the question: how is it that we could be hopeful and while grieving? Kind of being in that place of that space of two emotions going on. So there's a beginning phase of stuff's getting bad, but the person hasn't died yet. So, like, what do I do in that situation of, it's going to be grievous when someone is dying, and I need to be able to grieve the fact that they are
you could
dying.
say that it's being generally grievous.
Grievous. Yes, it's being generally grievous. Yes. Uh, anyways, situation's getting pretty bad, but my hope is gonna look different in this moment than it would at the other end of it. So in the beginning phase, if the person's not dead, I'm grieving, but I'm hoping that they get better and they don't die. So it's a different kind of hope in that moment because I believe, as a Christian, that God has the ability to heal that person and completely take care of whatever it is, cancer or asthma becoming very problematic, or whatever it may be. God can change that situation, and I don't know if this is going to be the moment where I just witness a miracle. So I'm going to believe and stay in hope that that's going to change, but I'm not going to pretend like this is not a distraught moment and like I don't feel bad. I feel terrible. I could very well lose this person from my life and not see them again until Christ raptures me or I die. So that's a real reality I have to grapple with, and it's warrant of working through it. Now, granted, maybe if I'm a caretaker of the person, that I should be conscientious about how I grieve that, so as to not make it that harder for the person also going through it. I don't know the rightness of that or the wrongness of that, because that could be repression. And maybe I need to grieve in front of that person because it makes them feel human in the situation. I don't know.
Well, talking about that, like I have a lot of difficulty doing that because I'll use Austin as an example. He's got a new kid, and what if I don't know, kids get something called SVT or it's SARS, or I don't know, it's some kind of disease they get by laying a certain way. It's a respiratory thing. What if that happens? And in Jesus' name, I hope that doesn't happen. I'm not speaking that on you, Austin. I'm just using it as an example. Um, on one hand, it's like, okay, I can acknowledge that that's really scary and it's very serious, and there could be implications for the child's health long term. But at the same time, I don't want to just cast a burdensome net of, well, here's how bad it could get, because hope redirects that, saying, well, it can get better. There's this Brandon, my birthday's in September. I've been thinking about this. If you ever think about it, this is what I'd like. There's a
Okay.
sweatshirt that I keep seeing on Facebook. And it's just a gray sweatshirt, and it's got a couple flowers here, and it says, "What if it all gets better?"
Ooh,
You
okay.
know, like, well, what if it all gets better? What if everything But
Write that down. Write that down.
at the same time, I feel like, from my perspective, grieving and actually not it's almost like if you jump to hope too quickly, you skip a very essential step in grieving. But sometimes I feel like if I grieve the way that I think I should, stepping into that with somebody saying, "Yeah, this is bad. Yeah, I'm sorry," like, actually promotes the things like depression or hopelessness, or you know the feeling of loss. Does that make sense?
Well, I feel like, but here's the thing. I do feel like grieving there with the person who is still alive, that gives them, at least, I feel like that would help them feel that they're not alone. And if their situation is grave, there does need to be a bit of recognition of the gravity and the graveness of it. But I feel like it's like you would grieve, but then you would find hope. And then you would grieve some more, and then you would go back to hope again. Kind of similar to the back and forth that King David went through frequently through the Psalms. If that's a whole back and forth of grieving and lamenting over something, but then there's hope, and you kind of come back to it. It's like, the situation looks bad. I may not make it through this, but God can bring me through this. So I'm going to hold on to this until either it gets changed or God takes me out, kind of thing. Um, so I feel like it's grieve, but then, all right, what am I holding on to? And just kind of focusing on that. Because also, like, I think grieving over the situation would help you go back to hope without anxiously going back to hope. Because that's something I have been guilty of, where I'm trying to hold on to hope, that I become anxious and think that if I don't have hope, then I'm going to be responsible for my failure.
So you're saying that if you jump right to hope and you skip the grieving side of things, you have anxious hope?
Anxious hope, yeah. I've felt anxious hope, where, like, I begin thinking, like, this success is riding on my shoulders, so I'm gonna, like, really get super hopeful without looking at the situation, because if I have a moment of doubt whatsoever, it's gonna ruin the healing and the thing I'm hoping for entirely. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does, and I think that's pervasive in a lot of the Christian circles, especially the Christian circles that lean more towards legalism, thinking that if I don't have enough faith, God's not going to do anything, or if I don't have faith, I'm not being a good witness. And I think, Lori Ashley comes to mind thinking about this. Like, she went through a period of grieving where she was trying to figure out her family dynamics, and she talks about this publicly. I don't want to do her injustice or dishonor her in saying this, but I think it was really cool watching how she grieved through that openly. She just talked about it without saying, "Yeah, it's going to get better." Like, sometimes it was really bad, and she just needed to feel that.
Mm.
And Ariane does that really well too. She'll actually feel her feelings, and I think, for me, I mean, we talk about this every night at our Wednesday group, but it's almost like within my box of feelings, I've got a bottle for each individual feeling, and I don't open that bottle until it's full. And when that bottle's full, it becomes overflowing and it dominates every other feeling.
Hmm.
Um, and I don't know. I think I'd like to get better at going to that box of feelings and pulling out each bottle, and making sure that everything's been maintained well, and pour them out so that everything's equal and even and healthy. But within the framework of grief, I don't know. I just don't know where the balance is between, how long you go feeling something with somebody or yourself if you're the one that's grieving, and how you incorporate hope or when it's time, because it requires finesse.
Well, then I think that's when you need to start looking at, okay, now the situation that I was hoping for did not happen the way I expected it to. The person died, and now the other person I'm consoling or myself, I'm grieving through stuff. How do I go about having hope in that scenario? So then that's a different kind of hope. I feel like you could have a hope that the person could still be resurrected. Like that's I think that's a pretty valid, but you'd have to have like a. I feel like in order to have hope that someone's gonna be resurrected, I feel like there's gonna have to be like a knowing in that moment, uh, in order to stay in that hope for any length of time. Not necessarily that you'd have in the beginning, but to like stay there, because if the knowing is not there, then that could become once again anxious hope, when hours and minutes and days pass and the person's still dead, then it becomes more toxic than actual proper hope. I feel like, and it goes into denial. I would say that the person is just,
Oh.
not dead when they are dead, kind of thing. So on the other end, it depends. You definitely can start off with that hope because you never know. Jesus could resurrect that person from the dead. But then if he doesn't in that time, then I'd have to think, okay, where do I feel peace that this is something that's going to happen, and go to God and talk about it and see if I get confirmation.
Well,
Otherwise,
here's a question for you. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I just need to say this before I forget. Like you were talking about denial a second ago, and that just really hit me because I think just thinking about what Eric's going through and how for a lot of his life, he operated in denial of the doubt that he had,
mhm.
and how that's affecting him now. When does anxious hope turn into denial? I mean, maybe this is a tangent. Maybe that's a whole other talk altogether.
No, I mean it's a good thing to look at because it's connected in a way. Um, I think honestly, if hope starts to create anxiety, it's turning more and more into denial. Because like real hope, anything of God is not going to come with the baggage of like fear. Like God, if God continuously says, "Fear not," and be anxious for nothing, and the thing that I'm doing is making me angry, or it's making me anxious, or it's making me uh unable to hear other people's opinions or thoughts or something, then it's probably turning into denial at that point. Um, because hope, I think similarly to faith, doesn't have to be justified. It doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to make sense. It didn't have. You don't have to defend it, kind of thing. If it's real, genuine hope, it will survive regardless of the attacks against it. Or if it gets wounded, it bounces back with just a little bit of conversation. Um, but I feel like that's when if you start to get, if you've been holding on to something for a while and it hasn't changed and you're starting to become anxious or angry or overly sensitive, then it could be a sign that it's now turning into denial, because what's happening is that what you're hoping for just repeatedly doesn't match up with reality, and you feel that, and but you're not dealing with it, so you just feel it. But no, everything's fine, but it's not fine because I'm in duress. Like, you know,
Yeah,
you have a false hope that things are going to get better when they're not, and so it's just wasted energy. What is Austin
yeah.
saying? He says you don't want to be in that in the wait, you don't want to be the friend who doesn't have hope. So is anxious hope, like that you're not hope that you're not sure of, is what y'all mean by anxious hope. Yeah, so anxious hope, when I'm saying the words anxious hope, what that means to me because I coined this word today, is
Thoughtraid TM.
thoughtraid TM. It's a kind of hope that everything rides on you, so it produces anxiety, but like you're like trying to hope something into existence. In other words, you could say it's uh what rules based faith. Like you're hoping that something is going to happen and you're moving in this particular direction, but it all rests on your shoulders. So there's no peace. It's just kind of a false hope because it's all on you. So that's what I mean when I say anxious hope, if that makes any sense to you.
Well, to me, anxious hope is when I just believe something blindly
Yeah.
without addressing how I feel about it. It's like, yeah, I feel this way, but you know what? I'm gonna put this neatly in the grief box. I'm gonna go over here into my hope box because that's not Christian, you know? And I think when I think about anxious hope, it's because I haven't addressed something that I know needs to be addressed before. It's almost like having dessert before dinner to a degree.
Hmm. Yeah. So I guess it's there's no exact definition, but we have these are what we're meaning when we say anxious hope. Um, so that's what I'm thinking of when it turns into denial is when I don't know the hope has reached its expiration date. Uh, because it was hope for something else that's just not gonna happen, and you're still holding on to it. Um, and it has to be let go because it's literally rotting, and it is rotting you because you're holding on to it.
You know what
Uh,
this makes me think of?
what?
Relationships. I
Yeah.
think a lot of us, thinking about expectations, I think there's a lot of hope that we have that isn't really God-inspired hope, and a lot of it has to do with things that we just want that aren't actually healthy or obtainable or realistic. And I think when those hopes are dashed, I think it's really easy to feel a certain way. But I think somewhere within that grieving process of letting go of our expectation, we arrive at the conclusion, oh, wait, I was believing beyond what was within my boundary to believe in the first place. And I've done that a lot. I think, like in past relationships, especially, I had an expectation that they were going to be something that they weren't, and that she was going to be something that she wasn't, and that I would be something that I wasn't. And when we didn't fulfill those expectations, that feeling of grief, it's like, whose fault is this? And I went around placing blame. And Brandon, you know about this relationship specifically.
Hmm.
I went around for a long time placing blame on somebody that did not deserve that blame just because my expectations were something that could never be achieved. And the reason they weren't achieved is because I didn't do the work to ask the questions to help me or that person get there. To figure out like what this, and I think the grief there for me, like that really hurt, and it was really sad for a long time and it sucked. Um, but luckily I had a group of friends and I had a community around me that asked me questions and just didn't say, hey, it'll get better. Hey, it'll turn around. No, like Tim, like what you're feeling is very normal, and
Yeah.
yeah, that really does suck. But I think, just thinking about that situation specifically, going back to the question for tonight, how do you remain hopeful while you're grieving? I think having somebody beside me in those moments, I was willing to let me feel the way I felt and was saying, "Oh man, I'm so sorry. Like that really does suck. Like, okay, so you're feeling this way, like validating how I was feeling, but also asking me questions geared towards hope, like things like, so do you think you had good intentions for your relationship, or do you think that your expectations were met? Do you think your expectations were kind of ridiculous?" And that kind of helped centralize. Okay, well, what's to blame here? And looking back, I wish Tim of today could go back to Tim of 8 or 9 years ago and say, your expectations are to blame for why you feel grievous in this relationship right now. Um, that was a rough lesson.
Mm.
That really sucked.
Yeah.
you know, and towards in the outro of that relationship, it was really tough to have hope for it because, man, like I was hoping for something that was not possible,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I was in denial.
Again, if your hope has expired and is no longer appropriate for the situation, then it becomes toxic to hold on to that hope. It's toxic hope. It's not good hope. Um, because
Mhm.
good hope doesn't come with the baggage of anxiety and taking your energy away, making you angry, isolating you. It doesn't come with that. A good hope does not come with those side effects. A good hope is a kind of hope that gets you up in the morning and gives you energy and excitement, and you don't have to force it. It's just, I'm looking forward to something that, I know it's going to be good. That's a good kind of hope. That's the hope you want to have. And so I think also grieving can is a important process of figuring out where the hope is supposed to be. Because I think, for instance, let's take a look at relationships since you brought them up. If there is a relationship that's coming to an end and now it's ended, grieving can help me figure out, okay, what do I feel about the situation? Like when I've been through a relationship, sometimes I see the badness of it that didn't work for me better in hindsight, but I figure that out as I grieve. And if I don't grieve something, I won't touch it, so I can't look and see what it is that's bothering me until I've properly grieved it. Because sometimes when I've gone through relationship issues, I'll feel shame about how I behaved in relationship in particular areas. And so long as I feel shame and don't grieve that particular area or talk about it or whatever, then I will never quite know why I felt like that and what part of this problem was me and the other person and all that kind of stuff. So that I think the grief is an important tool necessary to help figure out where to actually put hope, um, and to know
Mhm.
where to improve and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
But you could definitely grieve and have hope. And I think grieving is an important part of having the proper kind of hope and knowing where it needs to be placed. Because again, that anxious hope again, I'm talking about, like, I gotta make this happen. Like, if I'm not grieving that it's just didn't happen, I'm
Mhm.
I'm now I'm still holding on to that denial kind of hope that's not realistic.
Yeah, well, something else. I want to read something that a friend told me because if you guys are friends with me on Facebook, I asked this of my friends specifically. I'm sitting here thinking about the concept of hope, and I'm curious what you guys think about the question: how do you maintain hope while grieving? One of the responses I've just been sitting on for the past week. It's a little long, so please forgive me. But this person said, some of the most meaningful actions that was shown to my family and I during intense periods of loss were those who would sit and cry with us, not offer a how to of how to get over grief faster. Getting your basic needs met, like groceries delivered, house getting clean, yard work getting done, and being sat with and prayed over are moments that are so comforting to someone who can't fathom their own loss. Jesus calls humans to be the hands and the feet and to let him be God. Taking care of his children and not fixing them is so important. That's what I want to highlight in just a second. This helps give people hope because when you are at your lowest, getting your basic needs met without your own effort and feeling the love of Jesus without getting preached at heals so much quicker than trying to grin and bear your situation. Sometimes being given biblical advice on how to constantly move forward and leave the loss behind when you've lost something you loved the most is like spraying lemon on an open cut if it's not ready to be received. In short, in my own experience, the most healing I've ever felt when humans stayed humans was when humans stayed humans and loved me in the physical and tangible and let Jesus be healing in the quiet and rest periods of grief.
Hmm.
Whew.
I think it's really important letting Jesus be the healer of our hearts specifically and not trying to figure out how to heal that for the person, because he exists. If we're a Christian, he exists within our hearts. If not, he created our hearts and knows our inner thoughts, and so he would know better than anyone when it's time to heal a specific thing.
Yeah, well, I think community is just so imperative because, when I've had difficult times, I'm speaking to you guys too if you've ever experienced grief or loss. During those times, it's really difficult to keep a focus on hope, because all you're seeing is what you've lost, and it really hurts. But having people that can come in who are somewhat detached from the situation, who can simultaneously feel what I'm feeling, but also have one foot out the door into the house of hope and say, well, this is true, but this is also true. This is true, but this is also true. Um, I think that just highlights the need for community, because I like how this person said, we're not called to fix people. And going back to our thing for today, how do you maintain hope while you're grieving? You can't fix it, man. I can't bring that kid back. I can't bring that kid back from the death, or from being dead. I can't do that. I can't convince the families that it's time to move on. I can't do any of that. But I can meet their basic needs. I can bring them food. I can listen to them. I can exist with them. And I can also be that light saying, well, this is true, but also don't forget when they're ready, not trying to fix them, but just, kind of like somebody that's coming out of being comatose. You feed them ice chips, and then you feed them crumbs, and then you feed them little bits of I know you love that analogy, Brandon, because you use it a lot. But I think that's what it's like to introduce somebody who's grieving to hope. You do it a little bit at a time that's stomachable, while also validating the fact that, yeah, you can feel this,
Yeah. I think, yeah. I like that. I have no thoughts beyond that.
Yeah, so if you guys are watching and you have further thoughts as we get into the outro of tonight's talk, what do you think? How do you feel about hope and grief and the mixture of the two? Pretty curious.
Yeah. And are any of you guys grieving too? Because if you're grieving, we like to grieve with you. Honestly, I think it's important to kind of spend the time to help people feel what they feel. Because honestly, that is the only way you're going to get to actually feeling what you want to feel, and really like accepting every part of yourself. Like, I think one of the things that the world has been trying to work on and hasn't gone about it the healthiest way, but they got part of the truth, is the need of accepting yourself. And the only way that you're going to be able to do that is by recognizing all that's there. And in the perspective of grief, it's grieving what's there to be grieved. Because you're not gonna truly. I've seen enough now as a 30-year-old that there are no shortcuts to being okay. Like you can get there faster. You can streamline your direction where you're wanting to head, but then there's always bumps and things that kind of make it go off rails. I've seen this twice now, two different line studies of literal lines, of a line that kind of is going straight and a line that kind of dips down and goes into this valley and then back up again. And in both lines, they put a ball. Same exact content, same exact density, all that kind of stuff, and they let the ball drop. And the ball that reaches the end the first is the one that goes through all the dips and goes into the low and everything. And the one that goes the straight line is the slowest to getting to the end of the line. And I feel like that's so powerful, because life is a bunch of ups and downs. But the fastest way to get to where we're going is not in a straight line. It's going through those valleys and coming back up on those mountains and going back down into the valley again. That's ironically the fastest way to where we're trying to head. And so going through that grieving space.
I just say that because for a large portion of my life, I was just flat thinking, because my mom was very reactive. She was very emotive. And I was thinking, okay, well, I don't like the way that she feels, so I'm going to do the opposite, and this is healthier. So, man, every feeling that I had, I would just stuff down, and I would just try to remain as constant as possible, And I was thinking, okay, well, this is good, And surely I felt a certain kind of way. I was very unhappy, and I would say that I was depressed, and I had an addiction back then that consumed my life. But did I let people see that? No, I didn't let people see that at all, because that would disrupt my path, you know? But it's weird. My life started turning around when I allowed myself to go there and explore that. And when I did that, it's like, oh, okay, well, now that that's off my shoulders, I get to whoop, go up here where I have a level of happiness that I've never experienced before, because I'm not as weighed down by this crap. Um, but as you're talking, I'm also thinking, we asked the question, like, are you grieving? My question to you guys too, that I'd be willing to talk about after, or just let us know in the comments, whatever. Are you engaging in the anxious hope as well? Are you engaging in denial, where you're just thinking, everything's good, great, fantastic, my relationship's amazing, but subliminally or subconsciously, there are things that are wrong, but there's some kind of social norm that you're following that's like, because I'm a Christian, I can't acknowledge that I have an issue here, or because I don't want my relationship to go sour and I don't want to be alone, I can't acknowledge that I'm unhappy. If you're experiencing that anxious hope as well, I'd love to know, and you can let us know privately too.
Yeah. You can let us know in the comments. You can let us know in an email. You can let us know on Discord if you're on Discord. That's our favorite method of communication, at least for me. So either way, let us know if you'd like to. But yeah, that's what I'm learning. That's what I'm seeing, and that's all of my thoughts. And
yeah. So is this that's what he said moment, or with that said moment?
Oh, how does that's what he said and
I don't know, Brandon. I was just looking at your face and I was thinking things.
Okay, cool. But yes, I do think so, unless you've got anything else that you would like to say, Tim.
No.
Okay, cool. Well, that said, if you've enjoyed this stream, make sure to like it and hit the subscribe button, as well as the bell icon, so that you can know when we go live again, which will be this Friday. We'll love to have you there. Hopefully by that point, Dan will be feeling a little bit better, so we'll be able to have him to be a part of this. But he also has been recovering, not from COVID, but from something else. So it's crazy. Me and Noah and my parents and Noah's parents and Noah's girlfriend and all these people just got COVID all at once. We got... Years later, after COVID happened, I finally got had. I don't know what to think about. I'm still formulating those thoughts. But anyways, that's not the point. Make sure to hit the subscribe buttons. That way we can see you this Friday when we go live. But that said, we broadcast every week on Monday, Friday, and Saturday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And we hope to see you again this Friday. You want to be there. We'll love to spend some time together. You have a good night.
I see a potential in my eyes. I see a potential. I never lost sight of the reason why you're alive. You're alive. You're alive. We sing Jesus.